Well, Brandon, let's end the podcast talking about a little college football. Not a college football, but we're talking college football here to end the podcast, talking a little Florida State. And there was an article on ESPN that basically said a little inside, they said inside Florida State's complicated quarterback battle. So the question that I wanted to bring up and the question I'm going to ask you to start the segment is basically this. Deondre Francois, coming off an injury of last year, injured against Alabama, was injured all year. Will Deondre Francois be the starting quarterback for the Seminoles this year?
I think yes. I think the answer has to be yes. If you have a healthy Deondre Francois, that's got to be the guy that you go with. And the reason being is because look at what he did for you 2 years ago. That's something that you cannot forget. And those stats again, because I know we're all about, stats. Over 3,300 yards, 3,350 to be exact, 20 touchdowns, 7 interceptions in 13 games. And then, of course, you play against Alabama, you go down towards the end of the game that you're already losing, heartbreaking. But what Deondre Francois is able to bring to the table, I think, is more than what James Blackman would be able to bring. While James Blackman had some games where it looked like he was finally starting to come into his own, he still had too many mistakes. He's not what Deondre Francois is. Though. Oh, I know.
Okay.
I know.
I just want to throw that out there.
Deondre Francois was also a freshman when he
redshirt freshman.
Yeah.
Well, there's a he's technically a sophomore if he's a redshirt freshman.
I know, but I'm just saying.
I'm just saying. He had a year of experience. That's all I'm saying.
So, I think that when you look at James Blackman, and this is what I said back when this was all happening, Blackman was going to be the starter. He's about this big. He's not able to do this. He's not able to do the same types of things that Deondre Francois is able to do. And Francois is able to, I think, move a little bit more mobily. With the football, he's not going to, hold under center. I think he's just better at that. He brings also, I think, a better threat behind center. And their defenses aren't going to be able to stack the box against the run. They're definitely going to have to drop back. They cannot be all in on, stacking the box because you've got a weapon there behind center. My whole thing is that, again, if you have a healthy Deondre Francois, guy who's not in any trouble, nothing with, marijuana that he's holding for his girlfriend, I think that he's got to be your guy because he gives you the best chance to win.
Now, here's the thing I was kind of thinking about. And the marijuana thing I kind of want to get to in a little bit. Not necessarily because he wasn't charged for anything, but I want to get on that because of Willie Taggart coming in, Deondre Francois not being a guy that Willie Taggart recruited, and if that means anything. But the thing I want to get to first with me is the big question that I have about Deondre Francois, because when you look at the stats, they're not even close. Deondre Francois through the air almost over 3,000 yards, and the thing I like the most, 20 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. He was well above in his touchdown to interception ratio. James Blackman, just over 2,000 yards, 19 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. Almost the same touchdowns. However, he threw more interceptions. And when it comes to running the ball, they're virtually opposite sides of the world, where Blackman had negative 39 yards all year, whereas Deondre Francois in his last full season had almost 200 rushing yards and 5 rushing touchdowns. Now, here's the question I have with that. The thing that's going to decide for me a little bit of if Deondre Francois is going to be my quarterback is basically, how are you coming back from the knee injury? Because if he was a traditional, I'm under center, or if he's a shotgun guy that's a pocket guy, then I'm a little less worried about that because, yeah, you need to plant your legs and use your legs to throw with power, but you don't necessarily need to come back from the knee injury as strong as you are as a mobile quarterback. With him having that mobile threat, is he still going to be that little bit of a mobile threat with the knee injury coming back from it? Is he basically going to be Adrian Peterson where I don't have to worry about it? Or is he going to be on the other side where it's like, wow, he is just not the same player since the knee injury? That's going to be told through the spring. That's going to be told through training camp. We're not going to have that answer right now. But to me, that is the biggest question is, what are you going to be post-knee injury? Because the run game is it's not Michael Vick level. You're not running it most of the time. That's not the main bread and butter. But it is a little bit a part of your game if you're Deondre Francois.
I think that what's going to be really interesting is the fact that Willie Taggart has not coached either of these guys. Mm-hmm. These are not his guys. He did not recruit them. They're not attached to him.
No biases.
And there's no biases. So virtually, they both have a fighting chance to be the starting quarterback. And the system that Willie Taggart runs is also much different than what Jimbo Fisher did. Mm-hmm. Whereas Jimbo Fisher was very, very complex, very this, very that. There's much more simplified with Willie Taggart. Much less complicated, but it's much faster. Because it's much faster and they run more plays, they at Oregon they ran, I think, almost 10 more plays per game than Florida State did. That, again, is something that I think goes in favor to Deondre Francois. I think that, especially since he already had a year under his belt, or kind of...
Yeah, it's a redshirt freshman.
Yeah. So
he was still on the sideline. He was still in the building that first freshman... Well, true freshman year.
But it really... Now that wouldn't matter. But as a guy who I think they both now... are virtually at the same spot because Francois has a year that he played, a full year that he played, and Blackman has pretty much a full year that he played.
And both of them have to learn Willie Taggart's playbook.
And now and again, like I mentioned, they're both on the kind of the level playing field. But with what I saw out of Deondre Francois, he's a guy who I think is going to be able to handle that a little bit better, who's going to be able to move with the quickness and the speed of the offense a little bit better than a guy like Blackman will. Blackman, again, he has some really good traits about him. He can make some really strong throws, and we saw him make some really strong throws in certain games last year. Again, you're being thrown into the fire. You couldn't have expected really anything from Blackman. You just had a hope that he was going to at least be able to keep you in games, and that's what he was able to do as they ended up going. What did they go, like
5-6?
I was okay, 7-6.
With their
I was going to say
game.
like 5-7 or something.
With their bowl game, though.
Okay, 7-6. So definitely the worst season there under Jimbo Fisher, but I think there's going to be, with James Blackman, he'll be more prone to mistakes and possible interceptions or a fumble than a guy like Deondre Francois would be.
And let's put it this way, because I just looked it up. They were 3-6 until they won their last 4 against Delaware State, Florida, Louisiana Monroe, and Southern Miss. So 3 of those games, cupcake games. I'll give you the Florida one, even though Florida wasn't the same Florida team that we were used to, and we kind of knew they were going to get their coach fired at that point, but they really turned it around that last 3 games and then the bowl game to go 7-6. Here's a question that I was thinking about, because I'm also looking at, they also have, I believe, he is a sophomore heading into this one. They have a senior and a sophomore, but I'm looking more at the sophomore because even in our comment section for last year's Florida State preview, a lot of commenters talked about this kid, running back Cam Akers, where, oh, watch out for this guy. He's going to be a playmaker. And yeah, he was 70 yards shy of 1,000 yards, which is no chip change. 181 carries, only 7 touchdowns, though. And I know most people are going to go, Ricky, as a freshman, 7 touchdowns is not bad. I just feel like his numbers might improve this year. But the question I was going to ask you is, what are the odds, and is it crazy to say that Willie Taggart goes with a dual quarterback, where it's like, you know what? No one's won the job. We're going to play both of you evenly in different situations. Because we've seen some teams go to that, and it works for some teams. Could it work for Willie Taggart, or will he, if de facto, you're the number one guy, you're our only guy?
I don't know. I don't necessarily know if for the most part, I don't think I necessarily like the dual quarterback type of thing.
Because it messes up the rhythm.
I think that it can. There's certain situations and certain plays, maybe certain games where it could be successful, but I don't think that is a recipe for a season of success. So I think that you have to fall with one guy. You have to go with one guy who's going to know that he's going to be the starter. He's going to know that no matter the situation, he's going to be in there. I think that's what's going to be the most important thing. And for you as a coach, you want to be able to know that you're just putting in one guy, and you don't have to worry about this back and forth. And is this going to be an issue that this guy's in at this point? This guy's, am I putting this guy in the right situation? Should it really be this guy? No, you don't want to do that to yourself. Especially in your first season where you're just trying to get back on the right path with Florida State after a really down year last season. You go with one quarterback, and that's going to be your guy. That's going to be your guy. That's going to be your top dog, the guy that you know you're going with no matter what the game, who the opponent, that's who you go with. And I think, like I said, we've seen some dual quarterbacks where that they can be successful. Like when Alabama did it with, who was it, Blake Sims and Jake Coker. Like they had different situations where it worked. Yeah. But then we also saw with Florida last year where you had Felipe Franks, and then you had
Everett Golden. No, it wasn't Everett Golden. He was Florida State. Zaire Smith? No, not Smith. No. I'm going to look it up. You keep going with your point. I'll look it up.
But the point is that it wasn't necessarily a dual quarterback, but it's, okay, you've done well for these 3 games. Or no, I'm going to put you in. You did okay for these 3 games, but not good enough. So now I'm going to put it Zaire Smith. No,
Zaire Smith is NBA draft. I think it's Malik Zaire.
Malik Zaire, you got it. I don't know why we just said Zaire Smith, and I just said Zaire Smith.
It's because as I'm looking it up, and actually now I just got Malik to it. Zaire. Like I said, Malik Zaire Smith, and I'm like, no, I've been talking NBA draft so much.
We've had him on the mind.
That's the name that I come up to, and then as I'm looking it up, I'm like, I think it's Malik Zaire. I'm like, I'm going to make sure before I dart that one out of the mouth. But yeah, it was Malik Zaire.
So Malik Zaire, that's correct. But they had, back and forth. Zaire starts.
And there was also Little Del Rio as well.
Yes. And then Felipe Franks comes in. Like that. Florida, you already sucked last year. This is just not making it much better.
Dan Mullen's going to have that a lot, hopefully centered down.
Felipe Franks had an outstanding 60-yard game-winning pass, Hail Mary pass that probably shouldn't have been caught, but it was. But
against Tennessee, man.
But again, that's and it just everything went against Tennessee last year. But that's not something that you want to work yourself into that sort of situation. That does not help the player. It does not help the team. The fans will go crazy. And as a head coach, you've really just kind of put yourself in a tough spot.
Let me ask you this then. We'll get to what I said we were going to get to. The whole marijuana situation, although he wasn't charged, holding it for a girlfriend, what do you think of that whole situation with Deondre Francois and now with Willie Taggart and Florida State?
I think it's stupid. I think that the fact that the police had been monitoring his house for 2 months because they believed something was going on, that's not good. I don't care if it's yours, if you're holding it for a girlfriend, if you're holding it for your mom. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you are on a team that's going to need you, that you need to have your head straight and know what's important. And that's this conversation that Willie Taggart had with him, is that, I have certain expectations of you on this team. And if you're going to be a team leader, we need you to act like a team leader. And that's the conversation that he needs to have with him. Everyone makes mistakes. College kids will make mistakes. That's a mistake that he made. I think that if he learns from that, knows that these are not the types of things that I can be doing, certainly not caught doing, I think that what he needs to do now is learn from that, grow, and become then that vocal team leader, and then with examples of good things that he's doing then to make sure that people know guys, I'm all in on this team, and I'm not going to do anything to jeopardize that. Nor do you want to do anything to jeopardize a starting job potentially, because if that's something that happens during the year, if you're caught with something like that during the year, or DUI or this or that, that's a potential suspension that you're going to get from your head coach.
And I'm glad you bring that up.
You're going to be out of a game that your team may need you very badly in what could be a very tight race.
Well, and I'm glad you bring that up, because for me, it's not like you were a part of that. Yeah, you weren't charged. You're not going to be our starting quarterback. No, it's not like that. But the thing that I worry about is you've got Willie Taggart, new head coach. He's going to have to, especially in this first year, not change the culture. Like, it's not something bad, but he's going to have to instill his own culture, because his Florida State team, his Florida State locker room, hell, his Florida State practices are going to be different than Jimbo Fisher. He's got to make this Florida State team his and have his expectations on these players, basically. And the thing I worry about is, I'm not necessarily saying it's going to happen. I'm not saying, like, oh, Deondre Francois is a bad apple and yada, yada, yada. What I'm saying is, what if there's another slip-up, even if it's an accident, for whatever reason? Willie Taggart, we've said it before, I didn't recruit you. Yes, you have that coach young man situation of, like, I want to be here for you. I'm here to help you grow. What you hear every coach talk about with their football players, mostly it's, I build this relationship. They're like my own sons half the time, or 75% of the time. Like, look at the relationship we saw with Tom Herman and his guys, especially at Houston. And what I worry is that this learning moment for Deondre Francois, but does it put him on a short leash to where I'm Willie Taggart, I'm just getting to know you, we've already gotten off on a negative footing, and now the next problem, because you're on a short leash, it might not be, even if it's not an NCAA suspension, does it lead something from Willie Taggart and the football team to then have disciplinary action that wouldn't have been there if you didn't have this, and whatever the next one, if there is a next one, not saying there is, but if there is a next time, that would have been the first time, that would have been the warning, and basically that you used up your warning with a coach that doesn't quite know you yet.
Well, I think that you have for Deondre Francois. If anything were to happen during the regular season, I think that he's putting his starting job in jeopardy. I think he really is. And Willie Taggart, again, he basically said to him, and here's a quote, he's got to be smart about who he's around and what he's around and make good decisions. I advise him to just make sure he's around his teammates all the time. So
can I ask you a question really quick?
Sure.
Is it a Jimbo Fisher situation? And I only ask this because, are we going to see less and less of situations, not necessarily like this, but situations at all like this at Florida State, because Willie Taggart might have a different view on it than Jimbo Fisher? Because this is not the only time we've heard a Florida State player in the news for something under Jimbo Fisher, but number two, it's probably a lot more tame and a lot less serious than the allegations, and not charges because he was never charged, but the allegations that was against one of his other former quarterbacks in Jameis Winston. Is this down the road, after we get done with the season, after we get done with 3 years maybe, do we look back on it and say, it wasn't a Deondre Francois problem, it wasn't a Jameis Winston problem, it was a Jimbo Fisher problem, and he just let the guys almost do whatever they want, and Willie Taggart had a better control on his football team?
Every coach is going to be different in how they're going to handle a situation. I think you look at what happened with Alabama when one of the guys, I think we talked about it last off season, one of the guys was caught, he had a gun on him, stuff
Cam
like
Robinson.
that. Yes. And there was no suspension that came down for him. And you're going, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? There's no suspension. Guys caught with a gun and there's no suspension. There's another coach who could have been Willie Taggart. Who knows? Maybe he says, that's a bit much for me. You're gonna be suspended. Maybe he doesn't. But every coach is going to handle a situation differently.
Yep.
Every coach is going to handle a situation in the way that they've had success handling it before. Willie Taggart, this is not his first coaching gig. He's been, obviously Oregon,
Southern Florida.
He's dealt with all situations all over the place. You think that there are things happening that we're not hearing about? Absolutely. This is not uncommon. Yeah. Guys do stupid things.
Kids do stupid shit,
all the times. I mean, I'm sure there's parties and this and that and the other thing that guys go to get caught at, this or that and the other thing. And what their coaches, to a point, and it's to a certain extent, should be not putting it out there in the public because they're supposed to be trying to protect their players.
Let's put it this way, and I'll use this as an example, and I hope that you're not mad at me for saying this. I never got this way because, when I went to college, I was a commuter student, and number two, I was a lame-o and just went home most of the time and played World of Warcraft.
You were
and video games. But, I've heard stories from you where it's although it was I went to parties, it wasn't every party you went to, nothing happened. It's sometimes the RAs were there, and it's you know what, keep it down, where other times it's all right, we need to take some names, what's going on? It just happens. It's going to be college. It just depends on how severe is it and what's actually happening.
Yeah, I think that, again, it's one of those things where as long as Deondre Francois is able to stay away from getting his name into any bad activity,
just bad situations,
he's going to be okay. But to your point that you just made, you never know. I mean, you could be doing something that you believe to be completely harmless and truly be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And that has happened, I think, to a number of guys, in different things that we've heard in sports too, and in college sports. Sometimes the guy has done something egregiously wrong. Sometimes they are in the wrong place at the wrong time, and it's crap. So I think that sometimes if you're the coach then too, you have to look at the situation and be was it just an unfortunate situation where you were in the wrong place at the wrong time? Or is it just an unfortunate situation where you're not hanging out with the right people? And then Willie Taggart saying, you've got to hang out with the right people. If you're with your teammates, I feel like you're going to have a better chance of staying out of trouble than if you're off with people who that he could at least say that I don't know. He knows his teammates. He's going to know the guys on the team.
Basically,
and that's
what
who
I
he's
would
going to want him to hang out with to be influenced.
If it was me and I was the coach, I would do the same advice my grandmother and then my mom have given me in the past of, all right, you're a starting quarterback for Florida State. Because of this, every decision that you make, whether it's going to a party, whether it's going out with these people, you need to ask yourself this one question before you say yes or no. How will this affect my starting job? And will this affect my starting job? The second one before the first one. If it's yes, then how? If it's no, then you're good to go. If it's no, all right, go. If it's yes, how will it affect? And then make the decision from there. And kind of to yourself, is it worth the risk? If X, Y, and Z go how they could go, and it does affect it, are you willing to live with that consequence? That's kind of what's got to go on in the mind, and not everyone either thinks about that or, there are times I've made decisions where I haven't necessarily thought like that, where it's wow, that could have gone really bad, and if it did, I probably would have gotten in huge trouble for that, and I probably shouldn't have done that, and thank God my stupidity did not ruin my chances or my great situation that I had going on for me at the time.
And I think Deondre Francois just has to, in the back of his mind, think about that, because in my opinion, he is going to be the starting quarterback. He's going to win the starting quarterback job. I think that he has...
You took my question. I was going to ask you.
I think that he has a stronger arm. I think he's more accurate. I think that he has better quarterback vision. He certainly has better legs. We'll see how
he comes
that
back.
will go. But he just has a leg up on things over James Blackman. And that's not to say that James Blackman is a bad quarterback by any stretch, but he is just not what Deondre Francois is. And that is why Francois is... He would have a lot at stake if he were to do anything wrong or get caught with anything during the regular season, but I really would like to believe that he has enough respect for his new head coach, who has already talked with him, who has sat him down, who has said, okay, you made a mistake. We're going to move on from it. You're going to learn from it, as I know you are, because you're doing community service and you just can't be involved in any criminal activity for a certain amount of time, blah, blah, blah. You got the point. Now we're moving on. We're only talking football.
Make sure we don't have to have this conversation again, basically, is what's going on. And you kind of answered the question I was going to ask you to end this, is basically, will he be the starting quarterback?
And how about you?
I'm going to say the same thing. I would go with Deondre Francois. The only reason I wouldn't go with Deondre Francois, or not necessarily wouldn't go, but the only way I have a quarterback question is if he is not where I want him to be. If he's either not where I want him to be with the knee injury, and if he's not that same quarterback, if he cannot adapt. So basically, you can't be as mobile as you used to be. Can you adapt to being more of a pocket passer? And if not, if that hinders what we want to do in our success, then I think about making a change, or I think about maybe starting Blackman over Francois. But right now, if I had to say it, I would go at Francois because he doesn't turn the football over as much, and his stats prove he's got more yards, more completions, more touchdowns, just better than Blackman right now. But this is where you guys come in. Let us know what you think down below in that comment section about Florida State, about who should be their starting quarterback this year. I want to thank you guys for watching and listening. Housekeeping here at the end. If you want to help support the channel, make sure to check out patreon.com/Moselle Podcast. $10 tier reward. You can be on the podcast each and every month. One podcasted MVP each month that you're at that tier. Also, if you want to buy a t-shirt, that store link also down below in the description, or it's on mostvaluablepodcast.com, where you can catch MVP each and every day. And last but not least, please go to iTunes, Apple Podcasts, and give the Primetime Podcast a 5-star rating. Type in a little something about what you like about the podcast, why people should listen to it. It would mean the world to both Brandon and myself. Want to thank you guys for watching on YouTube. Want to thank you guys for listening on podcast services around the world. And as always, have a good day, everybody.